Wow, I'm incredibly inspired, a bit overwhelmed, but in a good way. I'm feeling, I don't know, full. Thank you for giving both of yourselves to all of us and for helping move us. I'll speak for myself, moving me to a place I didn't expect to be coming in here tonight in terms of my own feelings about ableism and the ability to be vulnerable in front of others in schools and classrooms. So I just want to personally thank both of you for that. We do have some questions from the audience, and I've drafted a few myself. So we'll start with this one. Maren and Frank, what similarities do you see in each other's work? And
that's such a great question. I think the first similarity that comes up for me is that, this is really about giving voice. It's about empowering people to tell their stories. And even though we were talking about two different topics, that's really the overriding theme. In my case, I'm kind of talking about, a system that suppresses voice or says that this is the voice that we want to put forward. And that's exactly the work that Frank is doing. So as far as I'm concerned, absolutely interconnected.
Yeah, before we went up, I was telling Maren a story about an autistic kid that I worked with years ago. And he was pretty high on the spectrum, had a lot of outbursts, right? And he wouldn't let anybody see his poem. And when he performed his poem for his class, and this was at a time where there just wasn't a lot of the information that Maren gave you, and even young people themselves weren't aware of, like, what's wrong with this kid? It was just that weird kid, right? And so he was kind of ostracized in the classroom, and they got irritated at his outbursts, and then he performed his poem. And I remember in his poem, in the opening lines, he said, "You guys think you're tired of the way my brain works. Well, let me tell you how tired I am of the way my brain works." And then he went on to deliver this entire poem about his internal process, about his frustrations, about having control over his own mind. And then I got an email from that teacher the following week that talked about how it completely transformed how the students this was a seventh grader, how the students in that classroom dealt with that particular kid, how they embraced that kid, how now that kid was part of the fabric of the classroom. They were no longer irritated by their outbursts. And as Maren said, it's about giving empowerment to the youth. And I allow the youth to kind of affect the system by inviting teachers and administrators and district workers into the classrooms at the end of a residency to watch and hear the kids' performances. So hopefully that impacts the way that they view the system and the way that they view the kids. And so I think they're very interconnected because it's just about giving the voice and the power to the young people.
Thank you. I'm going to direct this question to Maren. Maren, where have you seen examples of schools or systems that respond to ableism well?
Well, I think we have a great example right here in Minneapolis. We have kind of a quiet revolution going on in our school district, and then we have the first openly autistic school board member in Minneapolis. Joyner Emmerich, was elected, absolutely. Joyner deserves a huge round of applause. And I'm friends with Joyner. I met Joyner, many, many years ago. So I will admit I'm maybe a little biased, but I have heard Joyner bring up conversations about how we serve students with disabilities, about disproportionality, about segregation, about ableism in school board meetings that I have never heard before. Like we were never even just scratching the surface. So kudos to Minneapolis. We still have a lot of work to do, but we have a great example right here of what it looks like when we listen to people with disabilities and when they let us lead, or we let them lead us all to do better.
Thank you. Frank, this one is for you, but it's going to segue into a second question for both of you. In your work in particular during the pandemic over the last 3 years, how have you seen young people perhaps express themselves differently? Or in what way has the pandemic, if at all, sort of shaped or changed, how you've seen them showing up in your workshops and your residencies?
I think a couple of years ago, well, first off, I did workshops during distance learning.
Yeah, I guess that should
that
have been how did you do it?
Yeah, so that was cool. So in a couple different ways, I had an asynchronous lesson that I created because us artists don't, I work for myself. And so as soon as the school shut down, I'm thinking I'm never going to eat. So I got real creative, and I got in my living room and I set up my iPhone and I recorded my entire week-long residency and chopped it up into 6, 15, 20-minute videos and started selling it to schools through my agency, which was great because teachers were like, oh my goodness, something different to do. And then we started blending that into asynchronous learning, into synchronous learning where educators would use part of the videos and then part of the me being live, on my computer in the classrooms. But as we started to get back to school that first year, a lot of students wrote their poems. I'd say 80% of the students wrote their poems about something that was related to their experience with either distance learning or quarantining or just the inability to be social. So there was a lot of that happening. Now it's a little bit different because students are struggling with kind of re-socializing themselves. And so I'm hearing a lot of poems that students are writing about friendship, and they view friendship differently. In that same piece, Aftermath, there's a line in that song about how much time did I waste on friends that I had because it was convenient. And I think a lot of young people are starting to recognize who their friends really are and who's just the convenient person that was around. And so I'm hearing a lot of poetry about friendships and a lot more poetry about family, both on the positive and the negative, than maybe before. So less society and more internalized experiences.
Well, and because they've been at home and or in community in a very different way.
Yes.
Of course.
Yes.
Another sort of secondary question to that, I guess, how do you see the pandemic shifting or moving your issue area? They're, again, related, but not the same, to sort of a new phase of being in the world, right? We're not going to go back, or I think we've learned a lot, and I'm curious, what have you learned, and what do you think is sort of the next place for the work that you do post-pandemic? Even though, by the way, we still have the pandemic. I just want to name that too, by the way.
Yeah, I can maybe jump in on that one. I think the pandemic laid a lot of issues sort of bare that were there and that were problematic, and we started to see things in a way that maybe we didn't before, and we started to really understand how some of those inequities were affecting, our underserved communities, our students with disabilities, our students that maybe didn't have access to technology, or weren't able to participate in online learning. So I think we started seeing some things and talking about some things that maybe we hadn't really paid a whole lot of attention to in the past. I think we still owe a huge educational debt to our students, to many of our students, that have not been able to catch up. And we, really aren't having serious conversations about how exactly we're going to do that. I was one of the people that was involved in passing the Recovery Ed legislation at the Capitol that was supposed to kind of help students with disabilities have a pathway to have this conversation about what had been lost. And I will tell you, I spent a lot of hours working on that legislation, but I'm really disappointed. It did not do what we hoped it would do. It did not accomplish. It didn't come close to accomplishing what we wanted to do. So there's still a lot of work to be done. I think in terms of kind of where we go next, I'm really excited about the way we're thinking about accessibility as a result of the pandemic. There's a lot of things that became accessible to people that weren't before because we were doing them virtually, or because we were thinking about, how do we bring people to this event when we can't be together in person. Things like the closed captioning that maybe we weren't thinking about before. Things like image descriptions, so our thinking about this has evolved, but we have to make sure that we don't forget those lessons.
Right, that we don't slide.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I'll be very frank. I feel like we're at a crossroads with education in general. Standards, expectations, and accountability for students is the lowest I've ever seen it in the decades now that I've been working with education in the classroom and kind of mainlining to the students. I feel like a lot of parents and a lot of households are now like, "Oh, great, school's back in, take my child." And, and then teachers are being overwhelmed. As you guys very well know, a lot of teachers are leaving the profession because they don't feel the support between parents, administration, media, society, like everything's coming down on educators. And I want people to know that the students are aware of all of these things. And you have students that are like, we really want to get in and support our teachers. And then you have students that are like, we can really take advantage of this. And that's just the reality of where we're at in our schools. I will also say, though, I think a lot of educators are looking for creative ways to teach. This is an opportunity to change the way that we teach English or science or social studies. And I think the educators that are really committed to it are bringing in artists. They're bringing in speakers. They're bringing in guests. They're bringing in outside the box curriculum. They're using the technology. They're finding ways to, instead of constantly having, thank goodness, I haven't heard an educator mention Robert Frost in years now. Right? And there's nothing against Robert Frost, but if you're not going to talk about NBA Youngboy to these kids, right? If you can't bring in some hip hop, if you can't bring in some spoken word and say, okay, let's analyze poetry from this lens, right? I know that they still have this mandate that they have to teach Shakespeare, but I am happy to know that my unit is 2 weeks long and Shakespeare unit is 1 week long. Right? That wasn't the case before, and I think because of what's happened with the pandemic and really having to be active and creative in how you engage kids, I think that's a change for the better, and that teachers need to be supported in all of their outside the box ideas, and at the same time supported in, we need to reintroduce standards. And I'm just going to put this out here since we're on Facebook. District policies need to get rid of the cell phones in the classroom. I just had to say that.
Okay. There's definitely a teacher in this room. This question, thank you. This question, Maren, is for you. Can you describe any supports that you're seeing happening in classrooms that are working successfully for students with disabilities?
Yeah.
I know there's a range, of course.
Yep.
But are you seeing any? I mean, ideally in Minnesota.
Yeah. I mean, we have some
nationwide
educators that are doing a fantastic idea and really embracing neurodiversity affirming practices and going out of their way to educate themselves and learning about disability justice and really doing that work. And I mean, there are amazing things happening there. But I think the thing that I see as the real challenge is that that's not part of our teacher training. That's not part of our professional development, with few exceptions. Those folks are people that have gone out and sought this on their own. It's not something we're bringing to the conversation. So yeah, there is a lot of really incredible work that's being done, and so many amazing resources out there, again, created by people with disabilities. IEP goal banks and behavior modification alternatives and ways to reframe things and building connection over control. All of that stuff is out there, and people, it's there for the taking, but we really don't make it available to people. They have to go out and seek it on their own.
Well, I have one other statement from the audience, sort of an FYI. Speaking of the youth speaking for themselves, 2 years ago, the students of Ramsey Middle School discovered Ramsey was perhaps a terrible person and got St. Paul Public Schools to change the school name to Hidden River because they are on top of an aquifer. We are so proud of them. Students in Minneapolis actually did the same thing and changed Ramsey, my alma mater, to Allen Page Middle School. So, bit of FYI, and both of those efforts were led by the students.
Yeah, they're doing the work. I've had teachers talk to me about when students go down to the state capitol and lobby at the legislature, they're taking their spoken word poems down there and they're performing spoken word pieces to the legislators. So if we give them the opportunities and the platform, they take advantage of the opportunity to do the work.
They do. And my last question for both of you, if you could charge each person in this room or anyone watching this with sort of one action, but I'll let you give more than one, an action or a powerful next step, what would it be?
Yeah, I think my next step would be, maybe start a community practice in your school around ableism. Like, get a group of people together and read a book by a person with a disability, or, watch some of the great, YouTube again is a great resource to hear disability justice advocates talking about their work. There is so much out there, but we're just really not even having the conversation. So if each person would go back to their school and just connect with one other person to continue the conversation and build the momentum, I think we would make huge strides.
I was going to say something similar. Go back to your school and find those 3 or 4 or 5 students that really love poetry and spoken word, and give them the opportunity to address the student body once a month with poetry. Perform poems for the student body. Also, look up youthspeaks.org and see what James Cass and Paul Flores have done out in the Bay Area for the last 25 years. And then go to trueartspeaks.org and see what Tish Jones is doing right here in the Twin Cities in Guante. And start spoken word clubs in each school, and don't do it from the lens of, oh, I need 50 kids to sign up or join up. 3, 4, 5 kids is all you need that want to meet 1 or 2 days a week after school or before school. Let them hone their poems, and then give them the platform to be able to perform in a school assembly once a month, or on your school morning news once a month, or even over the announcements once a month, and watch it build a network of young people that are then using the art form to create something that will stand, that will create legacy in your school and help kids every year, right? 4, 5, 10, 20, who knows what it'll build, but I promise you, every school will have kids that are helped by that creation of a youth-led spoken word club or something in your school.
Thank you both. Thank you both so much for today and all of your conversation, all of that you've shared with us. This has been extremely powerful. Please thank our presenters.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.